Welcome everyone. This demonstration will walk you through the process of installing the PMDF messaging server on a Linux system. We're going to use PMDF version 6.6 for our demo, but the process is essentially the same for any version of PMDF. You should be able to successfully install PMDF on your system by following along with this video. Just pause it between steps. If you're a licensed customer, you should have received a PMDF distribution package. The package contains the PMDF CD-ROM, a welcome letter, and your licenses. You'll automatically receive a new CD-ROM when a new version of PMDF is released, and new licenses when you renew your support agreement. If you don't have, or can't find, your CD-ROM or licenses, contact your Process Software sales representative or email sales@process.com. They can provide you with links to download the latest version of PMDF, as well as electronic copies of your licenses. If you're not a licensed PMDF customer, contact the Process Software Sales Department to set up a free evaluation. If you want to run PMDF for personal, non-commercial use, you may qualify for a complimentary hobbyist license. PMDF is supported on RedHat Enterprise Linux version 4, Release 8, or later. In general, you can use it on most Linux distributions that support the RPM package manager. PMDF requires the x86 architecture and a Linux core version of 2.6.9-89 or later. Log in to the Linux system you're going to install PMDF on as an administrator and run the uname-a command to verify your system configuration. Make sure your Linux core version is later than 2.6.9-89 and you're running on the x86 architecture. Use the whereas command to make sure you have the RPM package manager installed. PMDF itself requires 80 megabytes of hard disk space. If you're using PMDF solely as a message transfer agent, or MTA, you're going to want to have at least another gigabyte or so available for processing queues and store and forward operations. If you're running a high volume messaging system, you may want to double or even triple that. If you want to use PMDF to store mail for your site's users so they can access it via POP, IMAP, or local mail clients like Pine or VMS Mail, you'll need enough free disk space to store all of their messages. On your system, run the df-k command to see how much free space is available on your disk. Make sure you have sufficient amount of free space on the disk where you're going to install PMDF. PMDF uses two special user accounts as part of its normal operations: PMDF and PMDF user. Each of these accounts has its own associated group. Create the groups for these accounts using your system's group add command. First, add the PMDF group. Then, add the PMDF user group. Now, use your system's user add command to add the PMDF user and the PMDF user. PMDF is distributed on a CD-ROM that contains the installation kits for every supported platform. The PMDF for Linux kit contains the base PMDF MTA product, as well as the layered PMDF DirSync, PMDF TLS, PMDF Message Store, PMDF Pop Store, and PMDF LAN products. Insert the PMDF CD-ROM into a CD-ROM drive that your Linux system can access, and mount it. The mounting procedure may vary a bit depending on your particular flavor of Linux, but in general, you want to mount the CD-ROM block device to a sensible mount point on your file system. Assuming you're running RedHat Enterprise Linux, and you've already created an empty CD-ROM directory as a mount point, run the mount command. Once you successfully mounted the CD-ROM, navigate to the directory that contains the Linux installation kit. It'll be in a Linux-x86/PMDF660 directory under the CD-ROM's mount point on your local file system. If you're familiar with PMDF on other file systems, you'll notice that there's just the one install kit. On Linux, layered products like TLS, Pop Store, and Message Store are integrated into the same kit. Use the RPM command line utility to install the PMDF kit. Type rpm-i and the name of the kit file on disk. Following standard RPM practice, the installation will complete silently and return you to the command prompt unless it encounters any errors. By default, PMDF is installed in the /opt/PMDF directory. If you'd like to install PMDF in a non-default location, pass the -- prefix option to the rpm command. For example, this command will install PMDF in the /user/PMDF directory. Regardless of where you choose to install PMDF, the installation will create a /PMDF symbolic link that points to the install directory. This symlink is what you'll use to access PMDF's commands and files. After the PMDF kit has been installed, you should unmount the distribution CD-ROM with the umount command. Now that PMDF is installed, you need to load your licenses. On Linux, you just need to copy your license files into the PMDF table directory. Each license file is named following the pattern of product name -platform.license. For example, the license file for the base MTA would be PMDF MTA Linux.license. Note that the product name needs to be capitalized and the license suffix needs to be lowercase. The license files are plain text files that contain authorization information and a checksum. This is an example of what a license file should look like. You should have a separate license file for each PMDF product you plan to use on the system. Make sure that the product release date field inside the license is later than a release date of the version of PMDF you're installing. PMDF licenses let you run any version of PMDF released before the license release date. You'll get new PMDF licenses with updated release dates whenever you renew your support contract. We're going to use the PMDF Pop Store, Message Store, and TLS Slater products on our demo system, in addition to the base email server, so we need to have these 4 license files in the PMDF table directory. PMDF makes use of 2 very important shell scripts that are run as periodic jobs. The first, post.sh, handles important tasks like retrying temporarily undeliverable messages and tidying up the message queues. By default, it's set to run every 4 hours. The second, return.sh, handles equally important tasks like returning undeliverable messages and rolling over log files. By default, it runs once a day at 12:30 a.m. You can set these jobs to run more or less often, depending on your site's needs. Since this is a brand new system, let's start off by accepting the defaults. Use the cron-tab command to create the periodic job entries for the PMDF user. Run crontab-u PMDF table cron jobs to put the periodic jobs in place. You can always use the crontab-e command to edit the PMDF user's periodic jobs if you need to adjust timing and frequency. Lots of Linux software assumes that the basic Sendmail MTA will always be installed. To preserve compatibility, PMDF provides a Sendmail replacement. Run the PMDF bin symlink script with the install argument. This will move aside, but not delete, any existing Sendmail executable on the system and replace it with PMDF's compatibility executable. This script will also deactivate Sendmail system startup scripts and replace them with PMDFs. Finally, create a set of basic PMDF configuration files using the web-based configuration generation utility. Manually start the PMDF web server by running pmdf bin http_server and passing it the -s flag to put it in standalone mode. You can access the configuration utility using any JavaScript-enabled web browser. The PMDF web server listens on TCP port 7633 by default. Make sure you specify that port number in your browser's address bar. Once you've used the web utility to generate an initial configuration, you're ready to start PMDF. Compile the configuration using the pmdf cnbuild command. This puts all of the configuration data in a single optimized location. Then, run the pmdf start command. You now have a functional, running PMDF installation on your Linux system. You can modify the basic configuration files you generated to perform any advanced functionality your site might require. As always, I hope you found this demonstration helpful. If you have any questions about PMDF, don't hesitate to reach out to us at Process Software via our website, email, or phone.